So imagine walking into a store, right? You pick up this $1,000 phone, and instead of handing the cashier your credit card, you hand them 3 weeks of your actual life.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
3 weeks of your lifespan, just gone forever. You're trading the time directly for the device.
I mean, it completely changes the math when you frame it that way. Suddenly, that phone feels a lot heavier.
It really does.
Right?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to completely rewire how you view your job, your spending, and, well, your future.
Mm.
We've got this fascinating stack of sources we're going through, mostly anchoring on the foundational philosophy of Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez.
Right, a total classic.
Exactly. But we're not stopping there. We're also blending in some modern frameworks from the FIRE movement, that's financial independence, retire early, and some highly practical rules for modern wealth building.
What's really compelling about this collection of sources is how it challenges this deeply ingrained assumption we all have, that money is just purchasing power, a medium of exchange.
Yeah, just paper or digits.
Yeah. Right, but they argue that it isn't paper or digits at all. It is literally, mathematically speaking, the finite time of your life.
And before we can even begin to apply that philosophy to daily spending, the sources force you to confront a pretty uncomfortable reality check.
Oh, yeah, the baseline.
Yeah, the baseline. You absolutely have to establish this by calculating 2 specific numbers. First, how much money have you earned in your entire lifetime? Like from your very first minimum wage summer job to your current salary. Every penny.
Every single penny.
Right. And second, what is your net worth right now? Like, what do you actually have to show for all those years of labor?
I mean, for a lot of people, doing this exercise is terrifying. The gap between those two numbers, what has passed through your hands versus what you've actually kept, can be staggering.
Totally.
It triggers a lot of regret. You realize, oh, I've made $1 million over the last decade, but I only have like $10,000 in the bank.
It honestly reminds me of stepping on a scale or doing a really comprehensive metabolic blood panel before starting a fitness journey.
Right. You don't want to look.
You don't. You might completely dread seeing your cholesterol levels and you want to look away, but you can't fix a systemic issue without knowing your starting coordinates.
Oh.
It's not about guilt, right? It's about establishing the physics of your current reality.
The goal is clarity. By just acknowledging the financial past without any judgment, you sort of neutralize the shame. You can't chart a course to a new destination if you're actively lying to yourself about where your ship is, currently docked.
Right. So to summarize step 1, it's simply acknowledging your financial past without shame so you can establish a completely factual, clear starting point for the transformation.
Exactly. Which opens the door to step 2, the core concept pioneered by Joe Dominguez. Once you know where you stand, you have to completely redefine what you're actually trading to get money.
The life energy concept.
Yes. He calls it life energy. You have a finite allotment of precious time on Earth, and you trade portions of it for a paycheck. But to see this clearly, the sources insist you have to cure what's called the money illusion.
Okay, the money illusion. Break that down.
So the money illusion is a behavioral bias. We tend to look at our income in nominal terms, like the sticker price on our salary. We tell ourselves, I make $50 an hour.
Sure.
But that ignores the systemic drag of your job on your actual life. To find your real hourly wage, you have to factor in the invisible time and the invisible costs required to sustain your employment.
The invisible time completely blew my mind when I mapped it out. It's not just your 9 to 5. It's the 45-minute commute both ways.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the hour you spend staring at the ceiling when you get home just trying to decompress from a bad meeting. It's the Sunday evening spent answering emails so you aren't buried on Monday morning.
Right, and then you add the invisible costs. The professional wardrobe you wouldn't otherwise buy, the gas and the wear and tear on your car, the expensive takeout you order on Wednesday night because you are physically too exhausted to chop vegetables and cook a meal.
Yeah, the exhaustion tax.
Yeah.
So when you subtract those costs from your weekly pay and then divide that new number by the actual inflated hours your job consumes, that $50 an hour job might objectively be paying you like $12 an hour in real terms.
$12 an hour, yeah.
But wait, I want to push back on this for a second because here's where the sources get really intense. If you start calculating every single minute and every cent this way, doesn't it run the risk of making you hyper-paranoid?
I can see why you'd think that.
It sounds exhausting to look at a cup of coffee and have to perform algebraic equations about your
I
lifespan.
get that hesitation, I really do. But the psychological mechanism here actually does the exact opposite. It doesn't breed paranoia. It breeds intentionality.
How so?
Well, look at how we currently spend. Historically, humans saw a direct physical link between the sweat of their brow and the harvest they consumed. Today, credit cards and digital wallets create this psychological screen, a layer of
Good
abstraction.
string. Yeah.
They completely sever the emotional connection between the labor required to earn the money and the act of spending it.
You're just tapping plastic on a glowing terminal. It doesn't hurt.
Precisely. Calculating your true hourly wage rips that screen away. It brings the reality of your labor back into focus. It shifts you out of autopilot consumption.
Okay, so to summarize step 2, you calculate your true hourly wage to cure that money illusion, allowing you to see money for what it really is, finite life energy.
Perfect summary.
So once you know your real hourly wage, how do you keep yourself from slipping back behind that screen? That brings us to steps 3 and 4. The sources talk about tracking every cent, but with a major twist. You don't just categorize your spending into groceries or entertainment.
Right. You convert the dollars spent in those categories into hours of your life energy. This is where the rubber meets the road.
Yes.
Instead of seeing a $100 pair of shoes on your bank statement, you divide that $100 by your real hourly wage. Let's say it's $12 an hour, like we said. Now, your spreadsheet says you spent over 8 hours of your life energy on those shoes. A full day of your life, just gone.
And then the framework demands you run every single spending category through 3 specific questions. Question 1. Did I receive fulfillment in proportion to the life energy spent?
Question 2. Is this expenditure in alignment with my values? Meaning, does this purchase reflect who I actually want to be?
And question 3, which is my absolute favorite, how would this spending category change if I didn't have to work for a living?
Oh, that third question is brutal.
That really is.
Because it exposes how much of our spending is strictly reactionary. Are you buying things to genuinely enhance your life? Or are you buying things to medicate the ambient stress of the job you're working to pay for those things?
It's a complete vicious cycle. You hate the job, so you buy a luxury car to make yourself feel better about the job, but now you have a massive car payment which traps you in the job.
Exactly.
It reminds me of the bot status test mentioned in our modern sources. You ask yourself, would I buy this item if I couldn't tell a single soul about it? Like if I couldn't post it online, or park it where my neighbors could see it, or wear it to the office?
If the answer is no, you are essentially trading your finite life energy for extrinsic validation. You are literally working hours of your life for someone else's fleeting, largely imagined approval.
So summarizing steps 3 and 4, it's about categorizing your spending into hours of life and ruthlessly questioning if those hours bring you joy and align with your values.
Right. But, human memory is short and willpower fades. The sources emphasize in step 5 that you have to get this data out of your head and make it inescapably visible.
Yes. Step 5, visibility alters behavior. If you want to change a system, you have to monitor it in real time.
Exactly. Treat it like an athlete tracking their performance.
The recommendation here is to plot your total monthly income versus your total monthly expenses on a physical wall chart. There's a fantastic example in the sources from the blog Thrifticle.
Oh, I love her story.
Right. She started her journey with a negative net worth, far more student debt than savings. She didn't just use a spreadsheet hidden in a folder on her laptop. She used physical graph paper taped to the back of her closet door.
Wow. Physical graph paper.
Yeah. Every month, she plotted her income line and her expense line with colored markers. By putting it on the closet door, she forced herself to confront her financial reality every single morning while getting dressed.
Environmental design is always stronger than raw willpower. What she was looking at every morning on that closet door was her margin of freedom.
The margin of freedom.
That is the gap between the income line and the expense line. The wider that gap grows, the more options you have. The chart becomes a dopamine hit. You can't improve what you don't track.
So the summary of step 5 is plotting your financial life on a highly visible chart to maintain daily motivation and really track your progress.
Yes. But we have to acknowledge there's a ceiling to frugality. That leads into step 6. You can only lower your expenses so much before you hit bone.
Yeah, we really need to talk about the dark side of minimizing spending, because the FIRE movement has had a massive evolution over the last decade regarding this exact issue.
For sure. The early days of the FIRE movement, what people often call lean FIRE, promoted a hardcore, almost punishing level of austerity. I mean, people were saving 50, 60, sometimes 75% of their income.
They were eating rice and beans for a decade, refusing to travel, living in tiny studio apartments,
and it led to an epidemic of burnout. If you live in strict deprivation during your 20s and 30s just so you can retire at 40, you risk arriving at the finish line only to realize you've completely forgotten how to live.
Right, you've atrophied your capacity for joy.
Exactly. Financial freedom shouldn't require sacrificing the present completely on the altar of the future.
That's why the philosophy has largely shifted toward lifestyle fire or conscious spending. It's about building modern guardrails that protect your savings rate without making you miserable. For instance, using the 24-hour rule for non-essential purchases.
Oh, that's a great one.
If you see something online you want, you just leave it in the cart for 24 hours.
The psychology there is fascinating. The urge to impulse buy is driven by a spike in cortisol and dopamine. Waiting 24 hours allows your neurochemistry to reset. The perceived urgency evaporates, and you often realize you don't actually want the item, you just wanted the thrill of acquiring it.
The sources also talk about buying for quality, not just hunting for the absolute cheapest option. The cheap option is often the most expensive option long-term because you have to replace it 3 times, which, again, costs you more life energy in the end.
Ramit Sethi, a prominent voice in modern personal finance, hammers on this idea when he talks about the danger of agonizing over $3 questions.
Oh, I absolutely love his take on this. People will burn massive amounts of willpower trying to decide whether they should buy a $3 coffee, right? Or they'll spend 10 hours building a spreadsheet to optimize credit card points for a $50 return.
Right, stepping over dollars to pick up pennies.
Exactly. Willpower is a finite resource. Sethi argues you should automate the small stuff and save your energy for the $30,000 questions.
Negotiating your salary, buying a house, choosing the right investment vehicle, those are the big wins that permanently alter your trajectory.
So summarizing step 6, reduce your expenses through intentional choices and modern guardrails, like the 24-hour rule, to avoid the trap of extreme deprivation.
Which pivots us perfectly to step 7. Because, as you said earlier, frugality has a floor. You can't cut your expenses below 0, but your income has no theoretical ceiling.
Right.
Once your spending is aligned with your values, you have to shift your focus to maximizing your earnings. Income is your primary point of leverage.
Okay, so how do the sources say we do that?
Well, there is a trap that people fall into once they get interested in finance. They obsess over the micromechanics of their investment portfolio. They'll spend months trying to get a 2% better return by rebalancing their mutual funds.
But let's look at the math there. If you have a $10,000 portfolio, extra 2% is, what, $200?
Exactly. But if you take those same months of research and energy and invest them into your own human capital, learning a new high-income skill, getting a certification, improving your public speaking, you can increase your salary by $20,000 or $30,000 a year.
Wow.
The return on investment for human capital completely dwarfs market returns, especially in the first half of your career.
So you should never hesitate to invest in yourself. Buying a book, taking a course, going to therapy to fix your burnout, buying high-quality food so your brain functions better, these aren't expenses. They are investments in your primary wealth-generating engine.
And it changes how you show up at work. You stop looking at your job as a place you just show up to trade hours for dollars. You start looking at it as an arena to create value.
That's a huge mindset shift.
It is. The economic reality is that money flows toward value creation. If you focus intensely on solving complex problems for your employer or your clients, the compensation naturally follows.
So what does this all mean? To summarize step 7, maximize your earnings by treating your human capital as your most valuable asset. Don't just chase dollars, create value and impact, and the dollars will chase you.
Perfectly said.
So you optimize your spending and you maximize your income. This rapidly widens that margin of freedom on your wall chart. But what are we actually building toward? When does the game fundamentally change? That is step 8, the crossover point.
Yes. The crossover point is the holy grail of financial independence. It is the exact mathematical moment when the passive income generated by your investments crosses above your monthly living expenses. At that moment, working for money becomes entirely optional.
But the math behind how we calculate that point has gotten a lot more nuanced in recent years. For a long time, the golden rule in the FIRE community was the 4% rule.
Right, the 4% rule.
The idea was that if you aggressively save 25 times your annual expenses and invest it in the stock market, you can safely withdraw 4% of that portfolio every single year in retirement without ever running out of money.
But the 4% rule was based on historical market data. Modern financial planners are pumping the brakes. We are dealing with unprecedented economic variables now. higher baseline inflation, longer life expectancies, and wild market volatility.
The biggest danger they point to is something called sequence of returns risk, which sounds like terrible Wall Street jargon, but it's actually a really simple, terrifying concept.
I can break that down. Sequence of returns risk is the danger of the stock market crashing right at the very beginning of your retirement.
Right.
If the market drops 20% in your first year, your portfolio shrinks massively. But you still have to pay for groceries and housing, so you still withdraw your 4%.
Because you can't just stop eating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you are pulling money out while the market is down, you are permanently cannibalizing your principal. Those shares are gone forever, so when the market eventually recovers, your portfolio doesn't have enough engine left to bounce back.
It's a mathematical death spiral. To protect against that, the modern consensus in our sources is shifting toward a much more conservative withdrawal rate, closer to 3.25 or 3.5%. That means instead of saving 25 times your annual expenses, you're aiming for closer to 30 times.
It demands a longer accumulation phase, yes, but it provides a bulletproof financial cushion. However, the modern movement has also realized that you don't have to wait until you hit that massive target to completely change your life.
And this is where concepts like Barista Fire and Coast Fire come in. Barista Fire is an amazing middle ground.
It really is.
You build up a solid but not complete nest egg. Then you quit the high-stress, 60-hour-a-week corporate job that's crushing your soul, and you take a low-stress, part-time job like working as a barista.
Right. The part-time job pays just enough to cover your current living expenses and maybe provides health insurance. Meanwhile, the nest egg you already built sits in the background, compounding undisturbed for another 20 years until traditional retirement age.
And Coast Fire is similar. You save incredibly aggressively in your 20s, building a critical mass of capital. Once you hit that number, you completely stop contributing to your retirement accounts. You coast.
You just work enough to cover your daily lifestyle.
The fascinating takeaway here in the summary for Step 8 is that you build your investment capital until your passive income crosses your living expenses, but adjusting for modern realities. The goal is a work-optional life, not necessarily quitting work forever.
It's about buying back your agency. You get to choose the work you do based on meaning rather than survival. But to maintain that agency over the long haul, you have to protect the systems you've built. The final phase, Step 9, is long-term wealth management. And the overarching theme here is ruthless simplicity.
Complex financial lives are fragile financial lives. If you have 5 different brokerage accounts, crypto wallets you've lost the passwords for, and a rental property 2 states away that you constantly worry about, you haven't bought freedom. You've bought a second job.
Simplicity compounds over time. The sources suggest automating everything, your investments, your bill payments, but you also need a defense mechanism against lifestyle creep. They recommend a quarterly audit.
A quarterly audit.
Yeah. Every 3 months, sit down for 20 minutes and hunt for systemic leaks. Find the random software subscriptions you forgot to cancel or the gym membership you stopped using. Those leaks might seem small, but they bleed your life energy over time.
And regarding where your money actually goes, the sources advocate for the barbell approach to investing. Imagine a physical weightlifting barbell. You have weights on the far left, weights on the far right, and nothing but empty steel in the middle.
The logic of the barbell approach is about balancing mathematical safety with human psychology. You put the vast majority of your wealth, say 90%, on the extremely safe, boring side of the barbell. Broad market index funds. Things that grow slowly and steadily over decades.
But humans get bored. We have a psychological itch to speculate, to chase the next big thing.
Yes, and if you try to repress that urge entirely, you eventually snap and put your whole life savings into a terrible speculative bet. So the barbell approach says you put the remaining 10% of your money on the extremely high-risk, high-reward side of the barbell.
Like angel investing or individual stocks.
Whatever interests you. It scratches the psychological itch, but if that 10% goes to zero, your actual financial foundation, the 90%, remains completely safe. You survive the worst-case scenarios.
Speaking of worst-case scenarios, we have to talk about the emergency fund. The sources advocate for a massive 12-month emergency fund in cash. Now, mathematically, keeping a full year's worth of expenses in a regular bank account is inefficient. That cash is losing purchasing power to inflation every single year.
It is a mathematical drag on your net worth. But spreadsheets don't experience anxiety, human beings do. We severely undervalue the psychological ROI of peace of mind. Knowing you have a 12-month runway completely changes your posture in the world.
It changes how you walk into a performance review with your boss. You aren't operating from a place of fear. If the company goes under or if you get a scary medical diagnosis, you don't have to panic about keeping the lights on.
To solidify that peace of mind, the sources recommend running quarterly disaster simulations.
That sounds intense.
It is, but it works. Sit down and legitimately ask yourself, if I was fired this afternoon, what is my exact sequence of actions tomorrow morning?
If the stock market drops 40% next week, how long can I survive on cash without selling my investments at a loss?
When you clearly imagine the bad times during the good times, you strip the unknown of its terror. Failure to proactively imagine disaster is the surest way to be destroyed by it.
Okay, so to summarize step 9, keep your financial system simple. Balance your investment risk using the barbell approach, and fiercely protect your peace of mind with a robust emergency fund and disaster simulations.
That's the blueprint.
So we've journeyed from confronting our raw financial past, to redefining money as the literal hours of our lives, to optimizing our spending, maximizing our value, and finally building bulletproof systems to protect our freedom. But as we wrap up, I think we have to circle back to what this is actually all for.
It's crucial to remember that above a certain baseline of security, once shelter, food, and basic comfort are met, money is purely a tool. It has no intrinsic value. It is a tool best used to buy back your time, to fund experiences with the people you love, to support your health, and to pursue a purposeful life.
There's a brilliant warning embedded in our sources about the danger of using money to optimize the life out of your life. When people first get a taste of real wealth, the temptation is to use it to eliminate every single minor friction. You hire someone to clean the house, someone to cook the meals, someone to mow the lawn. You outsource everything.
But the trap is that sometimes friction is where meaning lives. Cooking a messy meal with your partner on a Tuesday night, spending a Saturday afternoon elbow deep in dirt, planting a garden.
Yeah, the ordinary beauty of living.
Don't become so obsessed with optimizing your time that you remove that deeply human friction. True wealth isn't just an impossibly large number on a pristine spreadsheet. It is a life lived by intentional design.
It's making sure the life energy you spend actually buys you a life you want to live. Which brings us back to where we started. If money is truly just the physical manifestation of the finite hours of your life, I want you to think about all the things you've bought over the years just to impress other people.
The extrinsic validation stuff.
Exactly. The cars, the clothes, the upgrades, bought strictly for status. If you were to magically receive a sudden, full refund for all the life energy you've spent on those empty purchases, how many extra years of freedom would you have just added back to your life?